Caleb
On
Morrison
behalf of
had
the
a rule
service,
about his
thank you
past.
for being
He
here.
kept it
It's an
behind him and
honor
walked
to
forward.
perform for you all.
Not because he was ashamed of it or damaged by it in any way that required management, but because the work he had done for 11 years existed in a category of experience that did not translate well into ordinary conversation and that he had learned, through repeated attempts, served no useful purpose when imported into civilian life. People either disbelieved it or were made uncomfortable by it or became fascinated in a way that was its own kind of distortion. So he kept it where it belonged, behind him, and put his energy into what was in front of him. What was in front of him, primarily and completely, was his son Ben. Ben was 8, small for his age in the way that had stopped concerning the pediatrician but still occasionally concerned Caleb in the private, irrational manner of fathers who know perfectly well that a child's worth has nothing to do with percentiles. He was missing his 2 front teeth and had an encyclopedic knowledge of deep-sea creatures and a habit of narrating his own actions in third person when he was concentrating intensely, which Caleb found so genuinely delightful that he had never once mentioned it. Ben's mother had left when Ben was 2, not dramatically, simply conclusively, and Caleb had been the whole of Ben's parental world since then, which he regarded not as a burden but as the specific and serious honor it was. Caleb taught physical education at Westfield Elementary, the same school Ben attended, which his colleagues found convenient and his son found occasionally mortifying and which Caleb considered one of the better arrangements his post-service life had produced. He coached the youth soccer league on weekends. He was on the school safety committee. He brought the right snack on class party days without being reminded. He was, by any external measure, a thoroughly embedded member of a community, and he had made this embedding deliberately because Ben deserved roots and Caleb had spent 11 years living without them. His service record was not something he discussed at school board meetings or soccer practice or anywhere that comprised his current life. He listed his prior occupation as military service and answered follow-up questions with the minimum required information and redirected with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years being very good at not being noticed. He was at the regional school district's annual Education and Community Partnership Conference on a Thursday afternoon in October, mandatory attendance, they needed 3 staff per school, when the keynote speaker was announced and he looked at the program in his hand and felt the brief, specific adjustment of someone who has seen a familiar name in an unfamiliar context. Rear Admiral Victoria Cross, United States Navy. Keynote: Leadership, Service, and the Civilian Transition. He knew who she was. In certain operational communities you knew who the significant people were not through personal familiarity but through the transmission of professional reputation. Victoria Cross was significant. She had commanded SEAL teams at a level women had only recently accessed and had done so with a record that was, by any legitimate measure, exceptional. She was 47, had multiple combat deployments, and was currently the highest-ranking female officer in naval special warfare. Caleb respected her record the way you respect a peer's work, seriously, specifically, without embellishment. He did not expect her to know who he was. He did not expect any interaction at all. The conference was in the ballroom of the Meridian Center, round tables of 8, institutional coffee, the particular atmosphere of professional development events that everyone attended with resigned goodwill. Caleb sat with his colleagues from Westfield, drank the coffee without complaint, and listened to Admiral Cross deliver a keynote that was genuinely good, structured, honest, with the quality of someone who was not reading talking points but communicating things they had actually lived. He revised his respect slightly upward. The networking session afterward was the component of these events Caleb found least natural and most dutifully attended. He was at the coffee station attempting a refill when he became aware of Admiral Cross working the room 3 tables over with the efficient social momentum of someone who was good at these things and moved through them at pace. He turned back to the coffee and was minding his own business when her trajectory brought her to the station beside him and she reached past him for the creamer and glanced at his name tag, which listed name, school, and prior occupation field, where he had written simply, U.S. Navy. Navy, she said, with the collegial recognition of shared service. What branch? What rate? Special operations, he said. Minimum required. She looked at him with the professional assessment that ranking officers develop, reading a person the way you read a room, fast and layered. Teams. Yes ma'am. She had the practiced ease of authority. What was your call sign? He paused for approximately 1 second. Not hesitation. Just the brief consideration of whether the answer served any purpose. Then, because she had rank and a legitimate professional question and because he was not going to be dishonest about who he was, Iron Ghost. Something changed in her face. Not a dramatic change. A highly controlled person experiencing a significant internal event looks, to the untrained eye, like nothing much. But Caleb had spent 11 years in environments where reading micro-expressions at distance was operationally relevant, and what he saw cross Admiral Victoria Cross's face in the half-second after he said his call sign was not nothing. It was recognition, and underneath recognition, something considerably heavier. She was very still for a moment. "Iron Ghost," she said. The way people repeat things when they need the word to stay in the air long enough to verify it. "Yes, ma'am." She looked at him with the full weight of her attention, which was considerable. "Operation Nightfall," she said quietly. "Kandahar Province. 2013. He held her gaze. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria Cross had been a lieutenant commander in 2013. She had been embedded with a joint task force as an intelligence officer. She had been in the forward operating base when an extraction went catastrophically wrong in the early hours of a March morning, when communications failed and the team was cut off and 3 men who were supposed to be extracted in 11 minutes were instead in a collapsing situation for 4.5 hours. She had been in the operations room for all 4.5 hours of it. She had listened to the radio traffic. She had heard, through static and gunfire and the controlled, level voice of the team lead managing an impossible situation with the calm of someone who had decided outcomes rather than awaited them, every decision that got those 3 men out. She had written in her official after-action report, which Caleb had never read, the team lead's conduct under fire was the most sustained display of operational composure I have witnessed in 14 years of service. His call sign was Iron Ghost. I did not know his name. Asterisk. She knew his name now. It was on a conference name tag. It said Caleb Morrison and Westfield Elementary and former U.S. Navy. "You're a PE teacher," she said. Not mockingly. With the specific, recalibrating wonder of someone revising a picture. "Yes, ma'am. And soccer coach. And I'm on the school safety committee, which is less exciting than it sounds." She looked at him for a long moment. Around them the conference networking session continued its ambient noise, entirely unaware of what was happening at the coffee station. "Why?" she asked. Directly. Because she was the kind of person who asked direct questions. "My son goes to Westfield," Caleb said. "He's 8. He's missing his front teeth right now and he knows more about anglerfish than anyone I've ever met." He poured his coffee and held the cup in both hands. "After 11 years of being somewhere else I wanted to be where he was. Completely and consistently where he was." Victoria Cross stood at the coffee station of a regional education conference and looked at the man whose voice she had listened to for 4.5 hours in 2013 while he made decisions that brought 3 people home, and she did something that was not in her public reputation and that the room full of educators and administrators around them could not have contextualized. She said, "I've thought about that night a lot. About the person on the other end of that radio. I thought about what kind of man does what you did." She paused. "Now I know." Caleb looked at her steadily. "Any man on my team would have done the same. That's what men like you always say," she said. "It's never entirely true and it's never entirely false and it is the most honest thing you can say about it." She extended her hand. "It's an honor, Mr. Morrison." He shook it. Her grip was what he expected. "Admiral." She held the handshake for a moment and then said, with something that was almost a smile and was entirely genuine, "Iron Ghost coaching youth soccer. We're 4-2 this season," he said. She did smile then. "Fully and without management. Of course you are." She moved on through the networking room with her efficient professional momentum and Caleb took his coffee back to the Westfield table and sat down and drank it, and his colleague beside him said, "You know the Admiral. We crossed paths once," he said. After the conference, driving home through the October evening with the radio on low, Caleb thought about 2013 and Kandahar and 4.5 hours and the 3 men who went home. He thought about the specific, unlanguageable thing it was to make those decisions in those moments. He thought about what he had decided, after, about where he wanted his energy to go and what he wanted to build with the years he had been given. He pulled into the driveway and Ben was visible through the front window at the kitchen table, head bent over homework, narrating something quietly to himself in third person with the complete unself-consciousness of a child who does not know anyone is watching. Caleb sat in the car for a moment and looked at his son through the lit window. Then he went inside.